From an outside perspective, it may seem like the Tourney at Harrenhal in the year 281 AC lasted months. In truth, it did take weeks for all of the lords and knights to assemble at Harren's great ruin, and even when the tourney was at its close, it still took several weeks for those same lords to disperse back to their own lands. Comparisons were rightly made to the Great Council of 101 AC, wherein technically it only lasted a few days, but in reality took weeks before and after the council itself, given the sheer number of lords involved. So, while it may seem the tourney at Harrenhal lasted weeks, the event itself was only 7 days long, as the finest knights and noblest of lords of the 7 kingdoms of Westeros contended with lance and sword in the shadow of the towering walls of Harren's ruin. The victors and the vanquished alike gathered in the castle's cavernous hall of 100 hearths for feasting and celebration. Countless songs are sung and stories told of those days and nights beside the God's Eye. It's hard to know which are true and which are fables, but some of them certainly were true. To recall each and every one of them, list every duel, every jape, is far outside the context of our tale of King Aerys II Targaryen, his madness, and the downfall of House Targaryen, a task that should be left to the singers. But there are, in fact, 2 key events that should not be passed over when recounting the histories, for they would indeed prove to have unfathomable consequences. The first of these tales is the appearance of a mystery knight. Now, mystery knights in themselves are not all that uncommon a sight at tourneys. However, this one at Harrenhal is much more of note due to the impact they left in their wake. The knight seemed to be a slight young man in ill-fitting armour, clearly not made to fit him. His device was a carved white weirwood tree, its features twisted in mirth. The Knight of the Laughing Tree, as the challenger became known, managed to unhorse 3 men in successive tilts, to the delight of the common folk. But King Aerys II, often a suspicious man by nature, was not a man to take joy in mysteries. His grace became convinced that the tree on the Mystery Knight's shield was laughing at him, and with no more proof than that, he decided the Mystery Knight was in fact Jaime Lannister, his newest Kingsguard knight, who had defied Aerys' orders for him to guard Queen Rhaegar and Prince Viserys in King's Landing, returning back to Harrenhal to take part in the tourney as a mystery knight. The king proclaimed this to every man or serving girl who dared to enter his vicinity. The king became most wroth the more he fell into his wine, and he could not be reasoned with by his hand or the Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, Sir Gerald Hightower. Aerys thus commanded his own knights to defeat the Knight of the Laughing Tree when jousting resumed the next morning, so this treacherous knight who mocked him might be unmasked and exposed for all at Harrenhal to see. But there was a curious twist in this tale. As the sun rose the next morning and the knights made their way to the lists, the Knight of the Laughing Tree was nowhere to be found. They had vanished during the night, never to be seen or heard of again. In this, King Aerys found new reasons to cry conspiracy, taking this ill omen to mean someone close to him, who knew of his plans to have the knight exposed, had given him a warning. Even today, people wonder who this mystery knight was, and what their aim in entering the lists entailed. There has been much speculation as to the identity of the Knight of the Laughing Tree, and what their motivation was. There are some who suggested that this knight must have been northern, or perhaps a member of House Blackwood of the Riverlands, given the weirwood imagery used in the Mystery Knight's arms. But there is a very little known story among the reclusive crannogmen in the Neck that offers a version of events that, while indeed makes an interesting story, is just that, as far as we know, a story. It is said that a crannogman, in some versions of the tale, a young Howland Reed, Lord of Greywater Watch, attended the tourney and found himself being accosted and bullied by 3 squires around the ages of 15 years old. While this crannogman, perhaps Howland as we will use in this telling, was already a grown man, but given his small stature of the crannogmen, these boys were all much larger than him. The only weapon he carried was a small 3-pronged spear meant for hunting frogs. The boys easily snatched the spear away, with Howland thrown harshly into the ground. His assailants beat and mocked him savagely. But help did arrive for the crannogman in the form of Lyanna Stark, the maiden daughter of Lord Rhaegar Stark of Winterfell, whom House Reed is sworn to. The young girl is said to have shouted at the boys and fought the attackers off with blunted tawny swords, scattering them back to their masters. Howland was wounded in the attack, so Lyanna took him back to her family's tent, where she cleaned his wounds and bound them with fresh linen. There, the crannogmen was introduced to Lyanna's brothers, Brandon Stark, the heir to Winterfell, known as the Wild Wolf, Eddard Stark, the Quiet Wolf, and Benjen, the Pup. The same evening, Lyanna persuaded Howland to attend the feast marking the start of the tourney, insisting that he was highborn and had as much right to be there as anyone present to attend. Benjen is said to have found the small man some suitable clothing. Within the great hall of Harrenhal, he ate and he drank with the young Starks, as well as members of House Dustin, Hornwood, Mormont, and Manderley. Unlike the rest of this tale of the crannogmen, for this great feast we have more sources who were present. It is known that during the festivities, Prince Rhaegar Targaryen himself, a notably skilled musician, performed a sad and beautiful song that made the women present weep, including Lyanna Stark. When her brother Benjen teased her for this, she upturned a flagon of wine on his head. Present at this feast was Lord Robert Baratheon, who had engaged many of those present in drinking contests, which the future king clearly would win. It is said that Howland's attention was on a Shara Dane, a maid of House Dane with striking purple eyes, whom was at the tourney as a companion to Prince Rhaegar's wife, Elia Martell. Ashara is said to have danced with several lords and knights, first a member of the Kingsguard, whose identity differs from source to source, with some suggesting it was Barristan Selmy, while others her brother, Sir Arthur Dane. She then danced with Oberyn Martell, Elia's elder brother. Third, Lord John Connington, a reported close friend and confidant of Rhaegar Targaryen. And lastly, Eddard Stark, a dance that would become the source of many rumours for years to come, given the sad fate that would befall Ashara. As the night went on, and more wine was drunk, both Howland and Lyanna recognised the three bully squires who had assaulted the crannogmen. One served House Hague, one served House Blount, and the last boy served a knight of House Frey. Lyanna pointed them out to her brothers. Benjen offered to find the crannogman a horse and armour in order to avenge himself, but he failed to reply. Torn with indecision. His pride demanded vengeance, but he was afraid of losing and making a fool of himself and his people, thus bringing them much shame in the process. He was no knight, and was not used to horses and lances. Before going to sleep at the tent of Eddard, as the Quiet Wolf had offered him hospitality, he prayed to the old gods. During the first 2 days of the tourney, the knights of House Hague, Blount, and Frey each won their places among the champions in the lists. It was late in that afternoon, in the second day, the mystery knight of short stature appeared in the lists, the Knight of the Laughing Tree. The mystery knight challenged and defeated all 3 of the previous knights, whose squires had bullied Howland, when in custody over their horses and armour. None of them were particularly popular, so the small folk cheered for this mysterious knight of the Laughing Tree. When the defeated trio sought to ransom back their former property, the knight declared on his terms they ought to teach their rude squires honour. It is said, despite his small stature, the knight's voice boomed through his helm. The trio proceeded to chastise their squires sharply, and vengeance for Howland was met. As we have discussed, the Mystery Knight attracted the unwanted attention of King Aerys II. Robert Baratheon and Richard Lonmouth were determined to unmask him, while King Aerys was certain that the man was his enemy. Despite a search that went throughout the night of the Laughing Tree was not found. The king became angered by this, certain that someone close to him had given the warning to the traitor who would not show his face. An angry Aerys sent men, including Prince Rhaegar, to search for the vanished knight, but only his shield could be found abandoned in a tree. The tale of Howland Reed, if it is indeed the tale of Howland, and not another crannogman, gives us more insight into the motivations of the Knight of the Laughing Tree, and does confirm for the most part that this mystery knight had no ill intention against the king, but rather seeking justice for the wrongs of the ill-mannered squires. Who was this mystery knight? Was it Jaime Lannister, as King Aerys believed? It's not likely, given the tale of the crannogman. Was it Howland Reed? It's possible, albeit again unlikely, given what is known of Howland Reed. The weirwood sigil used by the Mystery Knight suggests the knight was one of the 3 Stark brothers, Brandon, Eddard and Benjen, given they had knowledge of Howland's plight. Yet given the Mystery Knight's short stature, it's hard to believe any of the 3 brothers fit. There are some who even suspect Lyanna Stark herself may very well have donned the ill-fitting armour, given her well-known, wild nature. But the reality is, there is not enough evidence to say with any level of certainty who the Knight of the Laughing Tree was, with it left up to each and every wanderer of the pages of history to decide for themselves. But the reason of all the Mystery Knights of history this one has stuck in the minds of people of Westeros is largely down to the events that would follow during the final days at Harrenhal.